Hey, what's up guys? So this is Escort's new Redline 360c. This is their new $749 flagship radar detector. I've had mine for about a week and a half or so now. I've got about 7 hours worth of driving time on it, with a mix of highway driving, city, as well as back road driving. I've also had a chance to do some long-range radar detector testing and compare it to all the other top options that are out there, and in this video, I want to go ahead and share my initial impressions of using the detector. Now, the Redline 360c, this is a detector that I personally would really like to run. My current three favorite windshield mount radar detectors are the Uniden R7, the Escort Max 360c, and the Valentine 1 Gen 2. None of those are perfect, of course, but they're all high-end detectors with arrows. Now, personally, I want a detector with great long-range performance, really good BSM filtering, as well as integrated GPS for all the GPS functionality, including auto lockouts. Unfortunately, none of those three detectors offer all of those three features that I want. However, the Redline 360c offers all of that. It, in theory, would offer great long-range performance, good BSM filtering, you've got GPS built in for your auto lockouts, low speed muting, red light camera alerts. It's got arrows, of course, and it also is RDD immune. It's got MRCD and MRCT detection. It's got Bluetooth built in. Admittedly, no open API, but it does have Bluetooth. It's got cloud alert sharing, so you can share alerts with other drivers. It's got Wi-Fi built in. It can automatically update itself while you drive. It's got a great mount. It's got great build quality. I mean, it's a detector that has a lot to offer. It checks almost every single box that you could possibly want. It's expensive, yes, at $749. It's now the most expensive windshield mount radar detector currently available on the market, but it checks almost every single box you could possibly want. You can kind of think of it as a Max 360c, just with longer range, better BSM filtering for fewer false alerts, and RDD immune for $100 more. It's based on the same platform, Escort is saying, as the Max CI 360, which is my favorite custom installed radar detector. I think it's a great option. It's got great performance, BSM filtering, arrows, GPS, Bluetooth, all that kind of stuff. And they basically took that platform and put it here into the Redline 360c. Unfortunately, this isn't as good as the Max 360c. I mean, yeah, they use the same platform. They had to make some changes, things like maybe, changing the LNAs, or the rear antenna is different. It's a lot bigger in the Max CI 360. It's got two horns out the back to get it to fit here. It just now shrunk down to one horn. But maybe with some of the changes, like the way they've introduced an SDR under the hood, I don't know exactly what it is, but this is not as good as the Max CI 360. It actually has quite a few bugs that we're seeing here with the initial release. It's a detector that sounds awesome on paper, but unfortunately, Escort's marketing department kind of set the expectations way up here. Realistically, I think they should maybe be here, which is still really good, but what they delivered is something maybe closer to here. And so with that said, let's go ahead and talk about what the detector is like right now here at launch. Now, whenever I hear the name Redline, I think of two things. I think of long distance performance and stealth. So let's first start talking about long distance range. I did some testing recently, and I've done a video about that. I'll link to that in the video description. And I basically found that the Redline 360c is capable of being a high-end performer like the Uniden R7 or the Valentine 1 Gen 2, but it does not do it consistently. The results with the detector are actually pretty inconsistent in terms of how well it does. I've also found that the ramp up, kind of how the signal goes from weak to strong as you get progressively closer to the source, is awful. It actually does a really bad job of conveying the information that you need as you're getting closer to the officer. Now, back in my last testing video, I shared a clip of the detector actually approaching a 33.8 radar gun. I'll go ahead and share another one now. This is going to be a 35.5 radar gun, and as you watch this clip, I want you to again pay attention to the ramp up and listen to see if it conveys accurately as you're getting close to the radar gun, and if it blasts full tilt right as you're in the kill zone as the officer is able to get your speed. So as you can see, again, a really poor ramp up. This is unfortunate. I think it's probably one of the biggest issues right now with the Redline 360c is it just does not do a good job of conveying the information as far as what's going on around you. On a similar note, the arrows are pretty much useless here on the Redline 360c. A lot of times you can pass a source and the arrows never actually flip from front to rear. Sometimes I'll actually find that it will flip, but what I find is it takes a lot longer to flip than any of the other detectors available that also have arrows. So the arrows are either much laggier and delayed or completely ineffective altogether. Additionally, the rear sensitivity, the detector performs like one of the other detectors that don't even have a rear antenna in the first place. Now, personally, I don't really care about long-range performance from the rear. It's cool, but really the main benefit of the rear antenna is just to get the functional arrows. But unfortunately, the Redline doesn't offer that either. Now, moving on to blind spot filtering. Escort said this is improved over the Max 360C, and in my experience, I'm actually finding it to be pretty good. This isn't the case for everybody, of course, but I've driven around with it for a little while. I've gotten maybe 4 BSM falses in 7 hours, which I think is actually really good. We're finding that it falses to your Chryslers, as well as your Hondas and Acuras, which is a pretty common one. When it does false, a lot of times, it can actually false to vehicles pretty far away, so it's going to be picking up more than maybe some of the other detectors. People are also reporting falses to maybe some of the less common sources, things like Ford pickup trucks or Lexuses, so that's kind of surprising, actually. The Redline 360c also has GPS built in, and because it's an Escort detector, you've got automatic GPS lockouts, which I think is an awesome feature. As you drive around, it's just going to learn where all the stationary false alerts are for you and begin locking them out and muting them for you without you having to do anything. That, I think, is a pretty useful feature. There's also things like auto mode, which can reduce the detector sensitivity at lower speeds and then raise it back up at higher speeds. I find that it's pretty useful for things like maybe filtering out automatic door openers in front of shopping centers. If you switch the detector over into highway mode, for example, and disable that filtering, you'll see that the detector will then start to false to those door openers. And this is actually pretty common with Escort detectors. A lot of them now are doing this. Now, something I'm seeing here with the detector is, remember the ramp-up issues that I just mentioned? I'm also seeing weird stuff to where maybe you'll pull up to a door opener and the detector will just go off full tilt, or as you're approaching a speed sign even, the detector will just give you a full tilt blast. It kind of seems to either maybe give you a weak alert or a full tilt blast, and nothing in between. Here's actually an example of driving toward the speed sign, and it just goes blast, blast, blast with no ramp-up at all. So again, here's another example of the Redline 360c in action. Again, the ramp up sucks here. It sounds like you keep getting hit with instant on, even though it's a constant on source. Plus, if you noticed, the arrows actually never flipped backwards after I passed the speed sign either. Now, something about the detector that I do like is the RDD immunity. I've had a chance to test it against the Spectre 3, and then as advertised, I found that the Redline 360c is completely stealth and undetectable to the Spectre 3. That's not a huge surprise. The Redline platform is kind of the gold standard when it comes to stealthiness, and the Redline 360c does live up to expectation in this regard. Next, moving on to MRCD and MRCT. I don't have that in my area here, so I haven't been able to test it myself, and I haven't seen any other tests up on the forums or anywhere else to see how well it works, but it does support both MRCD and MRCT detection, which I think is great. I tried turning it on myself just to see what it's like, and I actually found quite a few false alerts with multi-radar enabled. I also found that when it goes off to multi-radar, all the arrows blink. It does not give you directional information for multi-radar alerts the way maybe some other detectors would do. Now, on a related note, when you get an alert on laser, the detector behaves the same way. It just goes off with all 4 arrows blinking. There's no directional information present. I've gotten 2 laser falses so far. I've run the detector in firmware 1.1 and 1.2. 1.1 was just due to a server glitch on Escort side, so the detectors all started to downgrade themselves to an older firmware. So I found one false alert on laser. 1.2, one of the fixes for that was supposed to help some of this false laser alert issue, and I've actually found that the detector falses on 1.2 as well. Another thing to point out is the detector's overspeed alerts. There seems to be a bug in the app itself to where you can keep trying to disable the overspeed alert, but it keeps re-enabling it for you automatically, no matter what you do. And so as you drive around, the detector keeps warning you about overspeed alerts, even if you keep trying to disable that alert.
Over speed limit.
I don't think it happens if you're not running the Escort Live app and if you're maybe connected over Wi-Fi or not connected to the cloud at all. I think this particular one is a bug with the app, but either way, it's something that I think Escort needs to address. Escort Live itself is good. I mean, it's the same as we've had with all the other detectors. It, shares all your alerts with other drivers, so you can get notified of maybe an officer up ahead running instant on radar or laser or something. So it's just an extra layer of protection on top of what your radar detector is capable of by itself. I also like that the Redline 360c has Wi-Fi built in, and so instead of connecting out to the cloud via your phone, which I find to be kind of unreliable, it doesn't always reconnect through your phone, I find the Wi-Fi to actually just do a better job of connecting out through the cloud. Additionally, if you're connected over Wi-Fi, the detector can let you know when there's an update for the detector's firmware to fix bugs or add new features, or the red light camera and speed camera database. And so when there's an update available, you get notified in the detector. You can update if you want. It does take a little while, and your detector's not going to be able to function while it's updating, something to be aware of. But you have the ability of actually updating on the fly as soon as updates are released, which is pretty nice. So the detector, it has a lot of good aspects, don't get me wrong, but it also has a lot of bugs, and not everything works properly. And if I'm buying a detector for $750 and Escort is advertising it as the best of the best for people who don't want to settle, I expect a detector to just function properly. At this point, there's a lot of stuff that's just the fundamentals, the basics, that haven't been done right. I think that if they fix things like the ramp up, the arrow functionality, the rear antenna detection, the overspeed alerts, if they cut down on the false alerts on radar and laser and multi-radar, if they get the arrows working for multi-radar, if they address a lot of these issues with the detector, I think it could be a good choice, but in its current condition here at launch, that's simply not the case. And for that reason, I can't recommend it at this time. Now that said, Escort is working on an update to fix a lot of this stuff. A lot of these things are known issues. I mean, I'm surprised that the detector was released in its current form, but at least Escort is working on an update to correct things like the arrow functionality and the responsiveness and so on. Now that said, I don't think that you should buy the detector now with the promise of these issues being fixed down the line. There's kind of this rule of thumb when it comes to tech products is just buy it based on what it is now, and if the company maybe changes something in software, whether they add new features or fix bugs, let that be just kind of icing on the cake. Otherwise, you're just going to be left waiting for an update. And I think this is especially true for Escort products, where things like they've promised auto JTK support for their ZR5s and ZW5s, and we've been waiting literally years for them to keep their promise. Or even when they try to update something like the Max 360c, still to this day has lockup issues. Escort has actually released several firmware updates in an attempt to prevent the detector locking up from detecting radar. And to their credit, they have mostly eliminated the issue. It's much less often now, it's pretty rare, but unfortunately the detector does still lock up from time to time, which sucks. And yes, that's still the case even with firmware 1.11, the current firmware for the Max 360c. And so it's for that reason that I'm saying, hey, be careful waiting for firmware updates coming out from Escort. They may or may not come, and if they do, they may not fully deliver on their promises. That's just something I found with Escort is waiting for future updates can often be just an exercise in frustration. And so if you want the detector, I think it's probably best to wait until they actually fix the issues, and then once they have a solid, reliable, well-functioning detector, at that point I think it would make sense to get it. Right now though, I don't think it makes sense to get the detector. There's just too much that's wrong with it. Now, finally, I want to quickly talk about Escort's marketing. They have a long history of essentially over-promising and under-delivering. And we're seeing the same pattern here yet again with the marketing for the Redline 360c in various different ways. There's some things like the artificial intelligence, which is Redenso is making a big deal about the artificial intelligence because it's something pretty novel and awesome, but Escort is trying to co-opt the same term for marketing purposes, even though they're doing something radically different when they're referring to artificial intelligence, which is why they're also saying their ancient 9500iX also has artificial intelligence, even though they're doing something completely different than maybe what Redenso is doing. Coming back to the Redline 360c though, I mean, if they're saying this is the detector that's supposed to be the best of the best, that's just not the case. I mean, on paper it could be if it was functioning properly, but right now that's simply not the case. They're saying the detector has unprecedented detection range. There hasn't been a single test that has shown that to be the case. I mean, all of us testers are finding that other detectors are either able to meet its performance or outrange the Redline 360c. You've got things like how they're advertising twice the range of the Redline EX, and that's, I mean, they're saying that the detector has 6 dB of additional sensitivity in the lab compared to the Redline EX, which, yes, in ideal situations could translate to twice the range, but for most of us, that's not what we're going to experience in practice. And there's also things like they say flat out on their website that when the Redline 360 alerts, the alerts are going to be always true and never false. That's not the case at all. The detector falses just like any other radar detector. Again, whether it's radar, laser, multi-radar, anything else, the detector definitely still falses. And so if the detector still falses, why are you advertising that the alerts are always true and that they never false? You're lying to your customers. You're setting the bar unrealistically high and just going to wind up with pissed off customers who feel like you're deceiving them. I mean, what's up with that? And so, yeah, I'm quite frankly disappointed in the Redline 360c, and I think it's because this is a detector that I personally really would want to work well. I mean, it checks almost every single box that you could want. It has almost everything that I would want, and yes, it's expensive, but if they're saying this is a detector for people who want the best of the best and don't want to settle, if this detector is functioning properly, it could actually do that, even without all the crazy, ridiculous, inaccurate marketing. I think it could actually be a really good detector. But in its current form, it's not there yet. So I'm hopeful that some future software updates and fixes can turn it in to what I want it to be, to kind of the ultimate windshield mount detector. And we'll have to see, of course, how it maybe compares to Thea once that comes out. That's an interesting one as well. But that's another discussion for another time. I just want this detector to be like the best that it can, and I hope that Escort truly delivers on their promises and maximizes the capability here of the Redline 360c. But at this time, I don't think they're there yet. I think the detector is just not yet fully baked, and it's leaving a lot to be desired. But again, I still think it's very promising, and it has a lot to offer. So, yeah, that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.